Community can be a solution and it's part of the strategy. It's not just a tactic. It's not a feel-good, nice to have for every business. It can be a critical component of business growth, directly and indirectly. How can we shift the force of gravity in the startup universe from access to capital to relationships? If we shift how we approach it and use relationships as kind of our gravity to pull things together, create helpful tension between things that aren't helpful, it's a different universe. It's a different way to map our way.
Welcome to the Digital Community Leaders Podcast, where we chat with community experts, uncovering insights and leaving you with practical takeaways. Today, we're joined by Katie, the General Partner and Head of Community at Renew Venture Capital. Renew Venture Capital is a mission-driven investment firm backing companies that aim to close the wealth gap through innovation and impact. I can't wait to chat to Katie about all things community. Let's get started.
We are Steadfast Collective. We exist to craft digital applications that bring people together. A team of smart creatives, we are excited by technology, and we always aim to leave the internet in a better place than we found it. Working with many of the UK's leading communities, we use technology as an accelerator to help them grow and engage their members. Our applications resource membership organisations, grow businesses, and create value. We know what it takes to ship, market, and scale applications, and we apply this wealth of background knowledge to everything we do. We're not just another agency, we are community builders.
Hey, Katie, great to have you here. How are you doing?
I am doing well. How are you, Pete?
Yeah, I am very well. I am gonna look forward to chatting to you today about community. And yeah, I'm really intrigued because your journey is a little bit more of an interesting one. You kind of went from a marketing role into a community role, and I would love to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, interesting is quite a word for it. It's a non-linear or a squiggly career, as some people would say. But my background was in marketing, biz dev, strategy, all of that. Spent the first decade in-house roles, nonprofits, all of that before finding my way into early stage tech. And then have been working with and in early stage startups for the past decade, including co-founding and growing a community-based product to our exit in 2023 and then coming over to the VC side. So all that to say, I was doing community the whole time. I just didn't have the right word for it. And there wasn't as much of a home for it really within organizations. People didn't know where to put me. They knew that I'd be effective and I'd do interesting things. But it was certainly an interesting way to get here. But I'm glad it was not the traditional kind of straightforward path because it's been a lot of fun.
Were you aware of Renew VC, like the firm, when you were going through the exit? Were they part of that process, or are they completely separate things?
Completely separate.
Oh.
It just so happened that I had not been considering venture capital. I don't have an investment background. I took an econ class in university and did not like the vibe of the room, which is fascinating because I love kind of that math of things. But it was after I left my startup in the summer of 2023, I went on what I called a listening tour. And whoever was interesting and recommended from anyone I trusted, I was talking to. And just coming out of a place of pure curiosity and interest. I didn't even have any like career objectives swimming in the back of my mind. And I was listening to what excited people and listening for what excited me. And it was through that process that I got connected to Mark, the managing partner at Renew. And he was telling me this deep conviction he had that community was a necessary difference in the venture space and in startups. And I was like, you are talking to the right person. Yes. Through that conversation, learned he was actually looking for somebody to take the reins and build community as an infrastructure across the firm. And somehow I had talked myself into a job for probably the third or fourth time.
That's so good. So what does day-to-day look like for you?
Day-to-day is quite different. I have yet to meet someone who has an identical role as I do within the community space and also in venture capital. I do support directly and work with our portfolio founders. So sometimes it's looking at copy, looking at a pitch deck, talking to a founder through a hard time, being that sounding board even for the tears and celebrating the highlights. Also talking with the founder community at large, informally and now formally. We recently launched a founder community, a digital space just for founders. So some of that is in our community platform, and some of it is through community just as an informal part of my day. Lots of emails, lots of notifications, lots of Slack channels, and a very sturdy to-do list that I handwrite on paper because the priorities and the needs can change on a dime.
I mean, that's a good role of any. Yeah, I'm a handwritten to-do list sort of person. When it goes on paper, it means it's got to get done.
Right. And there's a satisfaction of crossing it out.
Absolutely.
You don't get that when you tick the box digitally.
100%. Does your role involve events and attending events and trying to do general outreach for Renew as well? Or are you primarily focused on the portfolio that's already in place?
Both. So I am both in and out and everywhere. So some of that is in-person events. I don't do as many of like the conferences or travel just because we don't need to as much as we did 5, 6, even a year ago. And a lot of virtual. So I'm very good friends with Zoom. And but I also, nothing beats the in person. Like being in community in the flesh hits different, and there's a place for both. So yeah, both hosting events, attending events, supporting events, all of the above.
You mentioned that Mark has put a heavy emphasis on community and that need for community infrastructure at Renew. But in my research, I also saw that there's a heavy emphasis on tech for good and how you can use investment money to actually build things which are going to leave the world better than you found them. I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
That's a deep value and philosophy that's like at the core of what we do and how. There's a lot of talk. We talk about this in the community world a bunch, but this idea that move fast and break things is a mantra that should be applied to everything. We see what happens with that. We see so much burnout, especially in the community world. And with tech and innovation, the whole thesis is that we can do things better. So being able to challenge systems and say, what if we built it differently? It doesn't have to be that way, is something we believe is just foundational. And so for us, we operate and move and invest and support from a stance that you don't have to choose between profit and purpose. And you don't have to try to kind of half-ass either,
Yeah.
because that's when you fail at both. And so saying, just even saying like, let's reframe how we think about it. These don't have to be opposing ends of a spectrum.
Yeah.
They don't have to be at odds. What can happen if we look at these outcomes, both financial outcomes of growing companies to huge, huge returns for investors and making the world better? What's possible if we hold those at the same time and then resource them in support of each other instead of against each other? And that's really just a driving force for us as a team, and also the founders and partners we work with. It's very much saying capital's a necessary ingredient, hard work, vision is necessary, but when you put it together with this alignment, it's like jet fuel.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. And I'm in July, I'm running an event with Stripe, with their head of global community, Ashley Williams. And I'm excited about that. And the theme of that event is for enterprise CMOs. And the idea is that community doesn't mean you're not making profit. It doesn't mean you're not growing. It just means actually maybe this is a more sustainable model than just throwing dollars at billionaires, because we've already tried that, and we don't need any more rich Silicon Valley folk. So let's find some other models. And
Exactly. We know what happens. We know how that story goes, and this idea of saying like community can be a solution, and it's part of the strategy. It's not just a tactic. It's not a feel good, nice to have for every business.
yeah,
It can be a critical component of business growth, directly and indirectly. It's my what I really love about this role and was excited about stepping into it is creating a new model and saying this is possible in hopes that other people would build their own and not necessarily duplicate what I've done, but interpret it and create their own version and saying, how can we shift the force of gravity in this startup universe from access to capital to relationships? So I have this analogy that money, capital is a necessary ingredient. It's everywhere in different densities. So it's like matter, right? Like matter, you can't take matter out of the world. But if we shift how we approach it and use relationships as kind of our gravity to pull things together, create helpful tension between things that aren't helpful, um, it's a different universe. It's a different way to map our way. So I'm excited. I want to listen into that session, see what gems you two have.
I'm excited. I'm really looking forward to it. I've got a couple of questions for you, so I'm going to dive in. In your experience in working with the various folk you are, and in kind of previous roles and whatnot, how does content play into that driving engagement when it comes to building something that's really thriving and it feels like it's got a bit of a momentum and a life of its own, rather than just, Katie shouting into the void?
Sometimes it's a bit of the latter, and I think that the idea of experimenting is always top of mind with content. It's always a test until you know. Um, I mean, content is a foundational piece. I like to think of it as a tool, and it's so varied. There's so many formats and so many channels that I really look at it as who I'm trying to reach and where they are, and what's the easiest, best way for them to find something to connect with emotionally and logically.
Yeah.
And that takes lots of different forms. So it can be practical things like we have a startup stack, right? Like what's your stack that you're using, that you're running your business on, like a template. It's not the most revolutionary tool, but it's simple, it's easy, it's shareable. And then we have deep dive videos where we get in depth. And then I have my podcast where I get into intimate conversations with founders. So looking at kind of content as a bridge, as a way to tell stories, and as a source of that, like as a magnet in that like gravity analogy, right? Like how am I using it to pull in people that are already thinking, wondering, excited, talking about it? So like especially with a community that is so global, right? Not only do we have time zones to coordinate, but we have like busy full lives.
Yeah.
Founders, investors, community folks, we are whole people. So like there are times where somebody is off with their kids, and being able to use content in digital tools to find the best ways to deliver it, to me, is a very human way than saying like, I'm going to force this and you have to come here, and if you don't like it, sorry, you miss out.
Have you experimented in the last couple of years with any printed materials?
I love print. Yes and no. It's
Okay.
tough when everyone is scattered across the world, connected to screens. But when there's a good use for print,
Yeah.
I love it. I'm trying to think of a really good. I mean, there's always like the sticker case and things like that, but we've done some handwritten notes,
Nice.
like on like printed like letterhead,
Yeah.
and those I love. I feel like there's nothing more personal than actually somebody writing something to you.
Yep.
What about you? What have you been doing or thinking in the printed material space?
I will show you 2 seconds.
We love a show and tell.
So we have a couple of things. So we ran the Digital Community Leaders Survey with lots of
Yes.
brands. And the first year we ran it, we did a PDF, and it was fine. And people download a PDF and they'll look at it once. Turns out if you make a very beautiful looking book with lovely pictures and graphs, they'll keep it around. And what's lovely about this is not only was it great for community managers, such a great sales tool. Like when someone reaches out to us about a project and we really align well with their values, and that they're keen to build out a community for their brands, sending them like this just gives a lot of gravitas. And then the other thing we've started doing since probably about the summer last year is we write and produce a lot of content. I noticed our clients weren't reading it on our website, so I started emailing out to them, and that was good. I send a weekly newsletter now to all of our clients, and it goes down well. Still not everyone's engaging, so I went, right, this content's going to waste. How are we going to use it? So now we print a newspaper. So every a couple of months, we put our best articles inside a newspaper,
Oh, fun.
and I post it out to anybody on the mailing list, which is primarily clients, maybe leads, that sort of stuff. And it just goes down so well. And we always get pictures of people reading it with their cup of coffee. And my approach is I will reach you with my content somehow. When I went to CMX, I took a bunch of these, and rather than business cards, I'll just leave these with people.
I love that. I'm so fortunate that one of our partners, Paul, is a world-class designer, just absolutely brilliant. And so we have like, I don't know if the camera, if you can,
So,
oh, I feel like a
yeah.
YouTuber. I
Really
feel
good.
like I'm on a YouTube haul. These little like enamel pins, and this is a logo for our venture studio. And so having these little physical tokens of and physical touch points in the world, especially when so much of community is digital,
Yeah.
they just have a different sense to them. They have a different permanence because everything online, especially content, especially anything branded, feels so ephemeral and it's so noisy. But if you can hold something in your hand and see care and
Mhm.
thought put into it, even though there's care and thought put into, I'm sure, all of your emails, um, all of the digital content I make, it's just a different thing.
It's similar to how we should be going into building our communities. There's an intentionality with print. There's effort, there's friction. Like it's actually quite high effort to go and get a newspaper printed. You know, you can make a mistake. You can different things, and there's an intentionality. And I feel like when we're setting up a community, it's not a random Instagram account. It is effort, and there needs to be intentionality and a plan behind it because it's not going to just fly the first time. There needs to be, and I think that intentionality is a word that's starting to really stick with me when it comes to chatting to folks about their community.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was just writing about this today about how we talk so much about launches, and when I started our community this spring, the formal founder community, I didn't launch it. I opened the doors
Mm,
and started welcoming people in, and there's a different feel to that, and it was intentional. And at first, I second guessed myself. I was like, "Ooh, I want higher numbers. Like, are the numbers right out of the gate going to impress people?" And then I checked myself and I was like, "What? One, who are these people that I'm imagining?
yes.
And do I actually care? Does it matter?" Because I chose to be intentional,
Mm,
right? Starting any new community, well, you can go the launch route and that works in some cases. Intentionality is so rooted not just in why community is part of our firm, but is part of the community. It's
mm,
filling a gap where founders are craving that. They're craving authenticity. They don't want to see people pretending to crush it on LinkedIn anymore. They want to know that they're having challenges or dealing with problems and can relate. And so that to me is such a hallmark of a good community is if you can tell there's been intention and it isn't just we're running the same playbook that we see other people
mm.
doing. I also love that you brought up friction, right? Because especially in the tech world, it's all about lower the friction, make it easy, make it easy for them to spend money and time and hard to leave, right? We like friction when it's keeping people with us,
Mhm,
but friction can be so valuable
mhm.
in slowing ourselves down and being intentional. And then also in making sure that we're having people self-select into the communities for the right reasons, right?
Mhm.
A little bit of friction on the front side can be massively valuable for everyone.
I talked about this in my talk at CMX. Oh, last time I mentioned CMX, I promise. But I talked about the links of community and hospitality and restaurants. And I grew up with parents who worked in catering. And I talk about how is your community a small community which has a small set menu, has white linen tablecloths, or is it a chain where people go in, they grab their meal in a box and they go? And both are absolutely fine. You just need to be aware of what you are, and people need to be aware of what they're coming in for. Because in that Michelin star restaurant, there is friction. It's expensive. It's going to be hard to get a seat. It's not as simple. You need to dress correctly. It's not as simple as just rocking up, getting a burger, and walking out. And that's okay as long as that's what people know they're coming for.
I love that analogy. It's so spot on, and it's something that we talk about. And even when I started 18 months ago, have you seen The Bear?
I
the
have.
TV show?
Yeah.
Okay. For those of you who haven't, it's all about the high pressure world of chefs, fine dining, the hard work of hospitality and running a restaurant. And we have a quote that we still say to each other on the team. Mark and Paul and I will we talk about peeling the mushrooms. And
Hmm.
there's a scene in there that it's about paying attention to the little things
Yeah.
and that the details matter, and we want to take care of the details and be thoughtful. So the hospitality arc is very strong in how we think of community as well. People aren't numbers. Like, we have whole manifestos about it, but this idea that people are people, they're not numbers on a spreadsheet, and we need to treat everyone with empathy and with respect and with dignity, and that feels like every good hospitality experience I've ever had, whether it be at a restaurant, a street food vendor, a hotel, or an airport, which are notoriously not the most fun environment.
The peeling the mushrooms thing, that was Olivia Colman's character is being asked why she peels the mushrooms, and she's head chef. She owns this incredibly fancy, well run restaurant, and she's there peeling them every day. And someone says why, and she says because it will make someone smile when they see it. They'll know that the dedication has gone into it, and I think there's something there to be said for actually in our onboarding of communities. It doesn't have to be, it can be just to show that you're there and you're intentional and you're available. That can be a big part of what's going on. I remember being part of the On Common community, and Rebecca, who led that really well, she was always so intentional in how she reached out to people. She knew if you had been quietly, imagine the common room platform helped this a touch. But she was so good at knowing if you'd been quiet for a few weeks and would reach out. And it was so intentional how she managed that community and knew the members intimately. And yeah, it's those little things that really stick with you and make you feel something rather than like you're just part of like a pasta machine going through it.
Exactly. And it wasn't that she was peeling the mushrooms or that Rebecca was welcoming because, they needed to show off their skill or their technique, right? It was all about how making the other person feel welcomed, feel seen, feel valued. And that requires a personal touch. And like, I love an automation and I love a good system as much as everyone else. And there are times where you need to have that human touch that isn't about anything else besides being of service.
It helps level the playing field, doesn't it, as well? If you go into, say, a thriving Slack of a couple of tens of thousands of members, and the CM reaches out to you directly, and it's not automated, it like levels the playing. They're not this person who I can't ever get hold of because they're always so busy, and I wouldn't want to interrupt them. Actually, it levels the playing field, and just like Olivia Colman peeling the mushrooms, she was head chef. She had no need to be the person who was peeling the mushrooms, but she was the one who chose to do it.
Yeah. I think community comes down to access at a lot of times, right?
Mm.
And part of that is how you create access to the people managing and running and creating the community, right? There's a lot of cults of personality out there that have communities pinned on them, and some work really well and some don't, right? Because they're not necessarily giving access. They're creating competition or they're creating scarcity.
Mm.
And I'm just a firm believer that abundance is much better in general and definitely within communities. Like, an abundance mindset is where communities thrive.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's just a tactic for growth.
Absolutely. We've alluded to a little bit that there's some metrics out there which are slightly more vanity rather than actually useful, and sometimes ego can drive those things. Are there any kind of less obvious metrics that you look out for when you're managing a community or advising on managing communities, which are maybe less obvious but really get to the health of that community?
This is going to sound small, but it's a really powerful data set. Is when you are talking with your community and you have the opportunity to have face to face, either via a screen or in person, how much are they multitasking?
Hmm. It's
I
good.
think that we can measure engagement in lots of different quantitative ways, but this
Yep.
qualitative, especially with events, especially depending on even a community of practice. It could be a DevRel community. It could be a community around proximity and local things. It doesn't have to be a deeply cause-led community for that to be the case. To me, that's the value. If people are fully plugged in and present,
Mm.
that is incredibly valuable information that something there is working really, you've hit the need. and you're delivering value,
Hmm.
especially when it's digital, right? You could have 16 screens up and be answering emails and also be petting your dog and jotting down a grocery list. But when somebody is plugged in and hanging on the words of what each other are saying, that's magic.
No, I like that. And it wasn't the answer I was expecting from you, because that is something that is nearly impossible to measure. But it is something that you would notice once you clock it. When you're in that webinar and you've got 30 people in front of you on Zoom, how many of them are actually typing away on their emails and how many are taking, interest in what you're actually saying? It's a really important one. Never really clocked it.
Yeah, well, and you're right, because it's hard to measure. You can't say statistically
Yeah.
this person was more single focused. But I love that's the art and the nuance of community, is that we can have data, we can use tools that give us rich insights, but it's all about how we analyze and use them, right? Like knowing how engaged or what your community members are engaged with in terms of content, or how where they log in from the most. That's great data, but it doesn't mean anything unless you're applying like intentional analysis to it.
That human element, bringing it back to
Yeah.
humanity again, isn't it? A lot of that is that, and ultimately, if we want to make a full circle here, that's just good hospitality, right? Like, if you've created this sort of atmosphere where actually I would rather be doing my emails than talking to you, then maybe you're not the right host, or maybe you've not got the right people in the room.
And that's okay. Like, I think there's also this space and there's a lot of great folks in community who say this, so I'm certainly not the first. Um, but sometimes people aren't the right fit for your community, and that's okay if
Mm.
they leave, right? And part of being a good host, a good community builder is, yes, helping shepherd and outreach and bring in the right folks, or who you believe to be the right folks, and then also letting people move in and out of the space.
Mm.
Things change, situations change, jobs change, bandwidth changes. I have a kid, so I know that factors in. And it's when communities try to hold too much control. Again, there's not agency. We need to respect those community members and say, like, if this is something where they'd rather be doing their email, let them do their email.
That's a great place to end there, Katie. Thank you so much for sharing. I've really enjoyed hearing your wisdom on community, hearing a bit about Renew. If people do want to find out more, or listen to the podcast or those kind of things, where's the best place to find out all things to do with you?
Yeah, the best place is to go to our website, renewvc.com. Everything's there, including links to the podcasts, our manifestos for founders and investors, and all the info on our founder community and upcoming events.
Perfect.
And this was so fun. I could stay and talk to you for 6 hours, but we have communities to tend to, my friend.
We've got communities. I'm in a different time zone. It's time for dinner. All of those things.
Delightful.
It's been good to chat. Thank you for your time, and we will speak again soon.